The Solo Show is brought to you, as always, by Victor Naraki Realtor, serving Disney in the greater Orlando area with celebratingflorida.com and disneyatyourdoorstep.com. Coming up on The Solo Show.
I thought that was his thing, was he was first a kid entertainer, but I'm realizing as I'm going, he just fell into that kind of accidentally and just excelled at it, but that's not where he wanted to be, and that was news to me.
Stan blew the budget on Cheeze-its and nacho cheese and extra deck chairs that he had to bring in for the incredible amount of people in the Solo Studios today. We're welcoming Chris, the independent podcaster, Mission Commander Justin from the Grand Circle Tour podcast, the Big Fat Panda hisself, John Saccheri, and Caleb Joshua Hill from Fantasyland Adventures. All of them in the Solo Studios to talk about Jim Henson, Idea Man, streaming now on Disney+.
I'm Realtor Victor Naraki, and I specialize in living near Disney World. I work directly with you. I'm not a referral agent. A referral agent takes your name, takes your number, and then sells you to a random agent for a stake in that commission. When you call me, you get me, and I am there for you from the initial consultation through to closing and all the steps in between. You get me. Now, if you want to reach me, visit disneyatyourdoorstep.com for all my links, and you will get me.
And when you do get Victor, tell him the Solo Show sent you. Jim Henson was a dreamer. He was a visionary filmmaker who touched millions, and he was an idea man. His work meant so much to so many people, and now Disney Plus is currently streaming a documentary called Jim Henson, Idea Man. It celebrates his life and his work. It also talks about the experimental films that drove his vision forward. Stan has filled the Solo Studios with fans of his work to not only discuss the documentary film, but to remember the impact that Jim Henson had on all of us.
Hello and welcome to another edition of The Solo Show. I am Stan Solo as always, and joining me today I got, full house. We're doing a roundtable discussion of Jim Henson's Idea Man, which is now available on Disney+. It's a runtime of 45 minutes, so it doesn't eat away too much of your day if you want to check it out. And we're going to go around the table, introduce everybody in the order that they arrived into the Solo Studios. So that brings Chris, the independent podcaster. You're in first. How are you doing today, my friend?
I am doing absolutely wonderful, and I'm coming to you live from the beautiful Midwest, where the cicadas have come out and keep everybody up all hours of the day and night. It's actually quite an interesting experience. However, I don't recommend it. So there you go.
And have you watched Jim Henson Idea Man at least?
I have. I actually got to see it on Saturday, and overall, without getting into the spoilers before we get into the conversation today, quite honestly, there was a lot of stuff in there that, quite honestly, I had no idea that he was actually involved with, let alone, how much of a passionate man he was towards his craft. And I also thought that it was, and I'm sure we'll get more into this later, but it was kind of interesting of how the time, the decades that he was actually starting was actually a start of a huge communication age. It was actually quite interesting to see that as a parallel to what we see today.
Yeah, for sure. Also joining us is Justin, Mission Commander Justin from the Grand Circle Tour podcast. How are you today, my friend? And what did you think of the show? I'm assuming you watched it.
I am doing fantastic as always. Thank you for asking. I did watch it last night. Finally had a chance to watch it. It was a great documentary about the life of Jim. And I was so fascinated by how much of his experimental filmmaking that he was interested in. Mm-hmm. And you can see that so much in everything that he does. It's like once they said that, I couldn't unsee it from everything that he did after that. So that was something fascinating for me. But yeah, I absolutely loved it.
Yeah. All righty. The third person in was from BigFatPanda.com is Big Fat Panda himself, John Saccheri. How are you today, my friend? And
I am all Hensoned out.
You're Hensoned out. He came prepared. He's got his Ernie glasses on and his Ernie sweater. He's your t-shirt. He's good to go.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And there was some new information in there. Like, I wasn't aware of that, certain things we'll get into, but I thought it was a really good documentary. And I find a lot of parallels between him and Walt Disney in my mind, obviously.
Yeah. And even George Lucas, too, to a certain degree, I felt.
I can see
and then our fourth member of the round table, who's on mute, he has to unmute himself, Caleb Joshua Hill from Fantasyland Adventures. How are you today, my friend? And did you get a chance to watch it all the way through? And what were your thoughts? Have you got a chance to watch it all the way through, I'm assuming, and what were your thoughts?
So I just loved the idea of just, Jim and Frank and the rest of the cast, did an amazing job for this whole company and starting this big thing. And, it's awesome, like growing up with, Sesame Street and Muppets and just, I just love it all. Just loved the whole thing. It was really great. Even the music too. The music was great.
Right on. Yes,
David
for sure.
Fleming was the composer.
Something that I always say at the beginning of these roundtable discussions is that there's going to be spoiler alerts, because if you haven't seen it, that's on you. But honestly, this is the history of a man that died 30 years ago. So if you don't know most of this stuff by now, well, that's really on you. Because we're going into spoilers for this documentary, but the documentary's on his life. So if you haven't watched it yet, you can still listen to us. It's not going to spoil anything, really. I'm going to start off kind of quickly going around. Was it 45 minutes? Was it too short? Was it too long? Was it just right enough? Chris?
It was more than 45 minutes. It was like an hour and 40 minutes by the way.
Was it really?
Yeah, it was an hour and 45 minutes.
An hour and 45 minutes, you're right.
Yeah.
You know what? I even wrote down an hour and 45 minutes, but I wrote 1 hour in writing and then 45 minutes.
That's okay. I mean, quite honestly, it was actually a relatively quick watch. I mean, very, very rare to have a slow part in it. And actually, I thought that Ron Howard, little Ronnie Howard of the Andy Griffith Show era, for those that really want to go back to the Wayback Machine, really did a fantastic job of, just overall capturing things, but in a way that I thought there was not a lot of fluff. I mean, it was really just, it was there. Yeah. And probably one of the biggest things that I had no idea about was just the idea and how, him and Frank Oz were so close as friends and partners in crime, so to speak. I mean, I knew that Frank Oz
was it long enough?
Oh, sorry. No, long enough. Yes, because honestly, if it hit any longer, it probably would have just stretched.
Yeah. Justin, too long enough, too short?
I could watch hours upon hours of information about this man and his life's work. But the documentary itself, I think I agree with Chris that it was very well paced. I loved how much they incorporated some of they would show some of his experimental films and then use some of that as like their transitions and things like that. So you got so much of him in every second of every shot, I felt. So that really helped kind of keep things moving and keep it all connected in a way. So I think it really worked well. And so, I think it was a good length.
It felt like it was divided up into 3 sections where you got pre-Muppets, Muppets, and then post-Muppets. It's kind of what the documentary felt like it was set up for. How about you, John?
I thought it was good. I thought it might have been a little long only because I go through YouTube and a lot of the clips that they showed, I'm really familiar with them, but I realized the documentary needed to show those if you're not familiar with them.
Yeah.
Like the little girl in the beginning giving Kermit a hard time, and then when he walks away a little perturbed, she says, "I love you." And, I remember seeing that so many times that they didn't have to play that for me, but they have to play it for everybody because who may not know it. So I think that's why an hour and 40 minutes is probably hard to get even that short, because you want to show everything.
Yeah. How about you, Caleb?
Yeah, like John said about the little girl and, her saying Cookie Monster every time she's saying A, B, C, D. It was so cute. But yeah, the whole film's length was great. Even those little clips, like again, for Walt Disney, for example, using those clips, if no one knows about Walt Disney, that's what they would use. So if anyone doesn't know about Walt Disney, that's what they would use. I just love the whole, those little clips they showed, like the one where I didn't see this until I saw on Sesame Street on Max. Where the guy falls down with the cake the whole time. I remember seeing that. It was pretty fun to see. Yeah,
for sure. For me,
it gave me a deja vu.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, big time. For me, I felt that the last part was kind of rushed. Like after his death, I felt that part was really rushed. Like they almost could.
Fraggle Rock was rushed. Yeah.
Yeah, Fraggle Rock was like, oh yeah, by the way, he did Fraggle Rock, and then he died, and it was. I thought that was a little bit too short.
I kind of thought when I thought that, I almost thought that they did that on purpose because they didn't want to add to the story. But it would have been nice to see how they integrated things more into today. But that's beside.
Yeah. Was there anything that we didn't know before that was kind of a surprise to us on this special? John.
I didn't realize how much he felt Sesame Street was boxing him into being this kid's person and that he didn't want it. I thought that was his thing, was he was first a kid entertainer, but I'm realizing as I'm going, he just fell into that kind of accidentally and just excelled at it, but that's not where he wanted to be. And that was news to me. Also, that his wife, when I first saw Jane, I thought it was Brian with a different hairdo. They look very much alike.
I didn't catch that. I'll have to go back and watch that now.
They are definitely her kids.
Yeah. Justin.
I would say the thing that surprised me the most was more about his experimental filmmaking. That, like I was saying earlier, the whole point, once you see that was his passion, you can kind of see it throughout everything that he does, and especially the Muppet Show, where it was so experimental. And I always thought that it was because he wanted to experiment with, with puppetry and how far he could take it. And it turns out it's just, he loved experimental filmmaking. He loved to experiment with kind of everything. And so it kind of explains so much of his career trajectory.
A good example of that, Justin, is at the opening of the Muppet Show when they do the "It's Time to Play the Music" things and all that. They didn't talk about this on the special, but the two monsters that are kind of purple and they walk underneath the pillars in the opening introduction. One of those is Jim Henson. And Frank Oz said to Jim, he said, "Why are you doing this? We can get anybody to do this. Like, this is kind of like beneath you." And Jim Henson's like, "No, I want to experience being in a full body costume and doing this. I've never done this before." He was always excited to try something new. Chris, what about you? Is there something, one or two items you learned?
Outside of the what was already brought up in the sense of the, experimental type items, it was one of those cases where you can tell that he was really trying to grasp onto the idea of creating things for television. And because if you think about it, that was late 60s, early 70s. Not every American had a television in their front room yet, type of thing. And it was also around that time that I was starting to actually watch TV, in the 70s. But the idea that he wanted to focus on this new media, and I thought that was actually quite interesting. Instead of going right to film, because he was creating these different experimental type films and the different processes and things like that, he still wanted to focus on TV, at least in that moment. And I thought that was actually quite interesting, and dare I say even a little bit bold, all things taken into consideration, because there really wasn't a lot of really good programmer kids. That's how he just ended up, he kind of slid into it, if you think about it.
Yeah, for sure. Caleb?
So one of the things I didn't know, that Ralph was made out of two half basketballs. I was like, that makes sense.
Kermit's eyes being ping pong
We could never
balls.
look at Ralph the same.
What else?
Well, what's curious about Ralph being a basketball is I wasn't aware of that, but I did know that Cookie Monster was a half a basketball. But Cookie Monster is kind of floppy on top, whereas Ralph is perfectly round. Like, how did they keep the shape?
Like,
so I didn't understand with Ralph.
And Cookie Monster actually had teeth too.
And Cookie Monster, you can see it more. It's a deflated basketball for sure. Yeah. What else did you have there,
Cookie
Caleb?
Monster also had teeth in the beginning as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you saw him, he was punching.
Yeah, some of the early designs.
It's probably for the.
And he wasn't blue at the beginning either.
I think that was from
Cookie
the Muppets Tonight, I think, or was that after? I can't remember.
What's
Muppets
that?
Tonight. Was it part of Muppets Tonight?
What was which part?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Muppets
Cookie Monster. Was he part of Muppets Tonight? I'm not sure.
I don't remember him in
Recall
Muppets
him
Tonight.
being on that.
Yeah,
Cookie Monster wouldn't have been in Muppets Tonight because he was still on Sesame Street at that time, and they were two different properties.
Because again, his teeth and stuff. I'm like thinking, like, man.
No, where he had teeth was like way before the Muppets.
Yeah, that's probably
before the Muppet Show.
Yeah.
That was back when they used to do a lot of advertising with the puppets or the Muppets, which kind of surprised me how much advertising they did. John,
the advertising though was adult before Sesame Street. Did you see Wilson's Meats? No, I'm a vegetarian. He pulls out a gun, he shoots the vegetarian puppet. While I may agree with no, I'm kidding. I couldn't believe that was kind of brutal. Like, wow, okay, this is not children's.
It was, yeah.
No one got canceled for that sort of thing back in the day.
The Wilkins Coffee one is pretty much one of the ones that I saw from a guy on YouTube. He was talking about it in a commercial, and I was like, Wilkins Coffee, and then you just shoot him, and they'd be like, what happened to that guy?
Yeah, with a cannon. Yeah, he'd shoot the guy with a cannon.
Yeah, it's like
in those ones. And what's really interesting too about those ads is like how many there were. Like Jim Henson doing American Express and whatnot. Like I remember when
I remember that one though.
the Peanuts characters first started doing MetLife commercials.
Yeah,
And everybody was freaking out because they're selling out. The Peanuts are selling out. Well, the Muppets been doing it since the 50s or 60s.
And I bet you a lot of people didn't know Jim until that Amex commercial. Even Brian said, remember, then he couldn't go out on the road without being recognized.
Yeah.
Because that put a face to the Muppets that I don't know if a lot of people really had.
Well, he was doing
At least-
like
at
Johnny
least
Carson and stuff like that. You know, the interviews.
Right.
Yeah. Chris?
No, the thing of it is that I think John actually makes a really good point. I mean, the fact of the matter is that back then it would have been our parents' generation, so to speak, making some general assumptions here, but you all know I'm getting at.
That's true, yeah.
You know, our parents were the ones that actually saw him in the interviews and would be the ones that would actually recognize him and so on and so forth. I do recall the Amex commercial.
Yeah.
And because they did that with a whole bunch of different celebrities at the time. And, you know, it was kind of interesting that he even said, you know, I'm getting recognized left and right, which also just goes to show on how, you know, much of a notoriety he was getting. If it wasn't for the spots on different talk shows and print and everything else like that, think about his ability to actually get his face be seen by all these people way before a time before social media. It was quite impressive to say that he had that kind of draw.
Yeah.
Probably, and he wasn't even like on a regular weekly show, I'll say a la Walt Disney, you know, when he did The Wonderful World of Disney. So it was quite magnificent to see how he was able to get his brand across, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, then you look at somebody like Carol Spiney, who played Big Bird in Oscar the Grouch.
Yeah.
Spinny. It wasn't until I was like an adult that I knew the name of who's playing Big Bird.
Me too. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Let alone the
Well, he
Big Bird
did.
was
So
like this.
Carol Spinning,
I don't know how. I don't know why.
well, yeah, Carol Spinning
Caleb?
had his own documentary years ago about Big Bird and stuff, being Big Bird.
Yeah. I
And
want
Elmo
to go
did
watch
too.
that one.
Elmo did. It was
Yeah. What I never understood with the Big Bird costume, though, like kind of way off topic here, though, but he had like a little TV strapped around his neck, and then it fed from the camera that he had through Big Bird, and his hand was working the mouth, while the other hand was working the other two hands via a string. Back then, where did he get a TV that small that he could hang it around his neck?
And the whole
That's
system was
true.
called Electronic Brawl. That's what Carol said. Electric Brawl.
Oh.
Okay.
And they used that for Dark
Yeah.
Crystal also, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
And The Bear in the Big Blue
Yeah.
House is also run
Yeah,
by the
that's what I
same
grew
type
up
of...
with, guys.
Yeah. Something that caught me off guard that I didn't realize was how young Frank Oz was. He was only 17. He was
Right?
still in school when he met Jim Henson. And of course, he was too young to like join the Muppets at that point. But he ended up becoming the best of friends. So Jim Henson, the age difference was quite a bit there.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much of an age difference there had been between those two. I always thought of them as contemporaries.
Yeah,
basically
me too.
about the same age.
Yeah.
Me too.
And then the other one, too, was like it was Jim's idea to cancel the Muppets.
I
I
see.
always figured it was a network decision.
Yeah, and it was while they were popular, apparently.
Yeah.
You know, everything was going good.
Yeah.
That takes some guts.
Yeah, it was the whole idea that, you know, wanted to go out on top, but it seemed like at that time it was just started, you know, in a certain aspect of it, you know, it's like it was still strong is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was,
You know
it was
what-
definitely at that point. It was, I mean, people were like lining up to get on the show. And they even mentioned that it's like they had to turn down so many people because they didn't have enough shows to put everyone on who wanted to go on the show. So it's like almost insane to think.
I think he was itching to make Dark Crystal so that he canceled it on purpose.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's exactly
Yeah,
what it was.
Interesting concept.
Yeah.
He wanted
Well,
to go
okay,
on
so-
and do something else.
I don't want to go off topic, and you can
go ahead.
rein me in, Stan, if I am. But every time I watch Dark Crystal, which is one of my favorite movies, like really is, like I'm obsessed with. I used to see Lord Grade Presents. I was like, who the heck is Lord Grade? Now, when I'm watching this documentary, it taught me who Lord Grade was, that he was the guy from Britain who said, come bring the Muppets here. And that's why he wasn't so concerned when the Muppets got canceled, because he's got bigger and better things going on with Jim Henson when Lord Grade presents the Dark Crystal.
Oh, cool. A fun fact with Dark Crystal is the eyeballs, like the pupils of the what do they call it, Justin? I'm going to say dialects, which is wrong. Or Panda, maybe you know.
The Skeksis or the Mystics?
One of them. They're actually toy Star Wars TIE Fighter, the cockpit is what they used, because I guess you take the wings off, and it had a little hinge on it that allowed them to control the eye somehow. And I have a friend that he posted on Facebook close-up pictures, like really close-up picture. You could totally see it's a Star Wars TIE Fighter toy. That was what he used for the pupils.
Use what you have.
Yeah. And I guess he was part of the Dark Crystal. He still has the wings from those TIE Fighters to this day. Yeah. Jim wasn't into puppets as a kid. He didn't start puppeteering until he was an adult.
That was so weird to me. I thought he started all. He just fell into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you always hear the story of him cutting up his mom's green coat. I thought he did that when he was like 12 or something.
Me too.
Yeah.
Wonder if
No, and it turns out it's just because he wanted to get into television, and that was his way in.
Mm-hmm.
I had heard that before.
That he was older?
That the reason he got into puppetry was because he wanted to get into television, and he saw an opportunity through puppetry to get into television.
Which is probably why he had a nod in the Muppet movie when Kermit and Fozzie were driving, and all of a sudden they see Big Bird on the side, and they're like, "Hey, do you want a lift?" "No, I'm heading to New York to get into public television." And so I think that was definitely I when he said that, I kind of chuckled at that whole thing, and I'm like, there was the nod to his beginning.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right.
I agree.
Yeah, for sure. Was there something in particular that we liked on this documentary that kind of stood out for us? Maybe we already knew it before, but it was something we really appreciated. Like, John, you were talking about, and I guess you didn't like that part with the girl saying Cookie Monster instead of counting.
Oh no, I loved it. I didn't realize that the time of the documentary is taken up by having to show everybody all these things. Like, there's at least 40 minutes, I think, of programming that's not part of the documentary. That's actual programming to show you to talk about something. Yeah. So that's the only reason. But I love that stuff.
Yeah. Was there something that you really enjoyed, Caleb?
I liked seeing all the characters, and I loved also seeing the relationship between Jim and Frank, because they were just amazing partners, and it's really funny because this year will be like Frank Oz will be a Disney legend in August, right? Like August.
Yeah.
And that's crazy because and Jim was a Disney legend in 2011, so that was it's cool to see those two. They were Ernie and Bird, and yeah. I can't remember.
How about you, Justin?
Well, kind of going off of that, I love seeing every bit of like anything with the background, where seeing the backstage, as it were, of how they're doing these things. But yeah, Bert and Ernie in particular. I was growing up, I loved Ernie. That was like one of my favorite characters of all time, and just to see that Ernie basically is Jim Henson, and Jim Henson basically is Ernie, because I loved his absurdism and his it was just kind of wacky takes on the world, his sarcasm and everything. So it was a joy to me to see that comes directly out of Jim. But yeah, and all of the backstage stuff is something that I absolutely love to see as well.
Yeah, the Jim Henson Creature Shop, seeing all that stuff going on. I would love to just walk around there for a day. My gosh. Panda?
I really like seeing Jim's heart in this, and I think you can tell the kind of person he is, that he doesn't have a axe to grind with people. He doesn't have a big ego. I was shocked that a lot of people referred to him as shy, and some people said, nah, really not shy, because it's hard to get that far and be shy. But I could see it in him, and he still was successful. But I felt like I knew who Jim was a lot more in this documentary as a person.
Yeah, I think his shyness was kind of similar to like George Lucas's shyness, where he's a shy person to meet somebody the first time, whatnot. But once he kind of gets to know you, he's a bit more open.
Yes.
Yeah, Chris?
Well, I think you actually touched base on the whole concept of the creature shop, and the thing is, they were showing. Excuse me. They were showing the different scenes of, like, as they were growing. They have everybody there. They're making models. They're making puppets. They're bringing out new things and interesting items. And I kind of had it in my mind that little did these people know that they were going to be a part of a legacy that was going to go out decades from that point. The idea, I mean, it wasn't really talked about, but it was certainly insinuated that, the growth that that he experienced in his company allowed it, in my opinion, to be, perpetuated beyond his death, which I really found interesting, because there's not a lot of people that would basically set up his legacy for success and not realize it.
Yeah.
Walt would probably be one of them that we would all agree with, that, Walt had things in motion before his death, and, things kept on perpetuating afterwards. He's one of the few, Jim Henson was one of the few people that I think that had such an influence on people. It kept going. It wasn't like, he's gone, we're going to stop this. It kept going into what it is today. And all the different things that, we think of Muppets, we think of, we think of Kermit, we think of Piggy, we think of Fozzie and the Muppet Show.
Mm-hmm.
But it was much more beyond that, and much more beyond his death. So I thought that was, it was just something that I had to really stop and think about a little bit as I was watching the show.
Yeah. Well, right just before his death, he was planning on selling the Muppets to Disney. And I guess that deal went through, but somehow it got configured that the kids inherited portions of it, which I think almost slows down Muppets doing anything these days, because it has to, not only does Disney have to okay it now, the Muppet Studios have to okay something now. You'll get artists that will go to Disney, they'll do a print or a painting, and they want to sell it in the Disney stores or Disney official artists of a Muppet painting they'll do, and Disney will say, yeah, that's wonderful, we'll finish, print it or paint it, we'll do it. But Jim Henson Company has to okay it first, and Jim Henson will say, no, we don't like that. And it's very frustrating for people to do anything with Muppets, which is probably why we don't see a lot of Muppet stuff happening. Like I often say, give them an old beat-up theater, make it a half-hour show, a vaudeville show, bring in one guest each week as a celebrity, and you'll have
it'll still be successful.
Yeah. I'm wondering if the Jim Henson people are saying, well, no, Jim didn't want that anymore, and that's why we're not doing that anymore. I'm wondering if that's the reason.
You would think that they would have enough foresight to know that so much time has passed that they wouldn't be repeating themselves anymore with the new generation. They could bring it back. Yeah. But I don't know. You could be right.
I really loved, they even said in the documentary that the very concept of the Muppet Show is like all of these weird people trying to put on a show. And that's the heart of the Muppet Show right there.
Yeah.
That's hence what this podcast.
Yes. Chris?
Yeah, to kind of go along with that, though, the interesting part is that the types of show that Disney through ABC has actually tried to continue on. Honestly, first off, I thought some of them were really hilarious, but the fact of the matter is they were geared towards the adults rather than the kids. Mm-hmm. And I'm even going to go ahead and say is they were geared towards the adults and not necessarily a family type showing either. I'm just going to call it what it is. Whereas like the Muppet Show, it was funny for the adults. It was funny for the kids.
Yeah.
There's only one other program today that I think is like that. Hello, Bluey. But it's one of those cases where I think it's hard to take that the next step, because even in the new Muppet movies that they had, what was the Muppets and the Muppets Most Wanted, two really good movies, but they had a hard sell. Yeah. That was really hard to get people to, especially the older fans as well as getting the younger generation. And it's really kind of a, like you said, Stan, I think it's being limited, and therefore it's not getting the notoriety, the presentation value and everything else out there in order for it to continue to be big successes. But when you see them in the parks or anything else like that, everybody stops what you're doing and you watch what's going on.
Yeah.
And you don't have someone like Jim Henson there either to push the envelope, to really experiment, because everyone is like, now we know what the Muppets are, so we want them to just be that. But Jim would have been, if he was still in charge of it, he would be pushing things further and further and trying new things all the time.
Yeah, John?
Stan, before we get too far, something Justin talked about his experimenting. Did you see in the beginning he was doing like stop motion titles? He was doing like frame by frame animated titles for his family vacations and shows. Yes. This man exhausted me. He's so busy. He's doing Muppet shows. He's doing things they can't get, and he has time to sit down for his family vacation and do stop motion animation because he wanted to experiment. He just was nonstop. He would have put me to sleep. I would have been
very exhausting.
It's very too much.
Something we talked about before we hit record was the Orson Welles interview clips.
That was great.
Those are really enjoyed because I don't think I've seen any of those before. That was all new to me.
And again, I give it to Orson for taking it so serious. Too. With his cigar in hand, he's talking about them like they're real. I love it.
Yeah. Chris, you had something to add?
No, I mean, it's not going to. I enjoyed seeing that because for me, that was seeing it for the first time.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was interesting just to see how. And I mean, it was a build up, and you can. And actually, going back to the whole idea that how Jim was a shy person. I think that was kind of portrayed in those interviews. He wasn't really like super duper outspoken. He wasn't really loud about anything. You know, he answered the questions. He answered them well. He answered them with a smile. His enthusiasm, he kind of kept to himself. At least that was how I interpreted those particular interviews. Whereas like today, you know, you see guest stars on TV shows and they're just completely animated, you know, in a sense of what they're trying to do and everything else. I just thought, you know, those interviews were just classic. I mean, that was fantastic because I never got to see stuff like that. And I don't, John, maybe you know if those items are on YouTube now, but I never saw them.
I would go look for them now, but I've never seen them.
Yeah.
I've looked for things.
Okay, then I'm not the only one. I don't feel like I'm missing anything.
That's everybody's homework. Find the Orson Welles interviews on YouTube and send me a message, a link.
And I'm sure that we can find Timepiece on YouTube. I bet that was his experimental film that we saw a lot of.
Yeah.
I want to watch it now and see what the heck he did.
Well, even
I think I had seen The Cube before, but I had not. I've never seen the Timepiece.
Yeah, these how they had like at the beginning there was like the mouth and the
so
eyes that were kind of
one of his.
I always wondered how they did that. Sorry,
No, they showed that at the very. I think at the very end they showed how they did it with the strings, I believe, and I was like, "What am I watching?
Yeah,
this is different."
But that was so 60s and 70s. Though,
yeah.
Wow.
Because even as a kid, I wondered how they did that watching it on Sesame Street. Caleb was talking about the chef falling down the stairs on the Sesame Street with the "I have one wedding cake,"
it was
whatever
1, 2, whatever number it was. But,
yeah, and that was Jim Henson's voice doing
wow, that's so cool.
And that really woke me up as to how much he actually did on the Sesame Street. Sure, he took care of all the Muppet stuff, but he was also controlling all the stop motion and all the other little experimental things he did on Sesame Street. A lot of it.
He was just like Walt Disney.
Yeah, especially in the first few years there, he was there a lot. If you think how often Kermit the Frog was on Sesame Street, I mean, so that was very likely Jim up until his death. I mean, and that was a lot. And then Ernie as well. You know, he was Bert and Ernie were him and Frank Oz. So yeah, I mean, he was there a lot. And then to also be doing, like you say, doing voiceovers and doing these stop motion films and doing all this stuff. It's just like Panda says, it's exhausting to think about how much stuff he did all the time.
Well, doing the Muppets for 5 years in London. So, I mean,
I had no idea it was done in London.
With that?
And every week is a different guest that you have to figure out their personality to get the most out of them.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. There was, I believe the Muppets, when they were in production, it was a 7-day job where the first day was meeting the guest star, finding out about them. And then the second day, I think they wrote everything that was pertaining to that guest star. And then they started filming the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 7th, 6th day. 6 days. It was a 6-day job. And then they had Saturday off. And that's when he would fly back to New York.
and do Sesame Street, apparently, amongst other things.
Yeah.
And then do animated stop motion titles.
Yeah.
Maybe while he's on the plane.
Yeah.
We were talking about Kermit. The way Kermit looked at the very early days, that was a bad looking puppet. I look at the first Kermit I
Many
made.
of those puppets in the early days looked bad.
Sorry, Justin?
I just said so many of those puppets in the early days looked terrible.
Yeah. Caleb, what were you going to say?
Oh, so that was part of the Sam and Friends, the things that he started before he did, you know, everything he started with. But yeah, it's, you know, Sam, which was like that. I guess it was made of clay because I remember him molding clay. I guess the heads were made of clay. I guess I'm not sure.
They might have vacuum formed it or something, maybe.
I don't know. For some reason I saw clay. I'm thinking it was part of the puppet. I don't know, but
yeah. The other thing too that I didn't realize was how hard it was to sell the Muppets. He had the Muppets. The idea before he had the Sesame Street starting, and he went to every studio twice trying to sell it.
How disappointed were they when they saw how successful it really was?
Well, that was just it. When it started winning the Emmys on ABC, the ABC producers were sitting there going, well, we let it go.
Well, yeah, that was like one of the early like syndicated programs, because I remember here it was on ABC, and it bothered me because at the time where I lived, I couldn't pull in the ABC channel over the air.
Oh yeah, and I said CBS. I was wrong. It's ABC. Eyewitness News was ABC.
It could have been. It was different.
No,
It was different.
It was Walter Cronkite at the end, and then it would come on. So it was.
Yeah, but no, it was different. It was different stations, different places, because it wasn't sold to like ABC or CBS. It was kind of like independently. It was like, a syndicated thing. So it's like, I think in some places it was on CBS, and other places it was on ABC.
Okay, could be. Yeah, I just know 7:30. My father made sure me and him were in front of the TV to watch it. So he enjoyed it too, thank God, because I must have been 7 or 8 and we were watching it, and it was just the best thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think Walter Cronkite was on CBS.
Oh, Stan, yeah, it was a thing. And I remember Walter Cronkite saying, and that's it with the news, whatever his signing off was, and we would get ready for, it's time to play the music.
Yeah,
that
and that would have been
so
CBS.
fast.
Walter Cronkite was on CBS. So but here it was on ABC. But
Thank you for helping me with that.
Where I am, it was on CBC. So actually, I think it was on Sunday nights after Wonderful World of Color, if I recall. In Canada.
Wow, ours was Monday.
Yeah.
For some reason, I always thought it was Sunday, but you could be right. You could be right on that.
Yeah. Again, it was like a syndicated program, so it was like each station would put it on whenever they had time to put it on. So it was probably at different times, different days, different stations.
Wow. Crazy.
Early days of syndication.
But it was before prime time. Before that 7 Central, 8 Eastern time slot. It was always just before that.
Yeah. Was there anything we didn't like on this documentary? Chris, what do you have?
Yeah, I know we kind of briefly talked about it beforehand. The idea that they didn't necessarily, add to anything of the story after his death and how it kind of dropped off. I would have liked to have known a little bit more about what the family did in the few years following that particular incident. Mainly because, I mean, like you said, Stan, they were pretty much getting ready to pen the deal with, to have it sold off to Disney, which, I was like, oh, so this is how that part begins. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, wait, we're going to probably hear a little bit more on how, Eisner kind of took it and kind of molded it into something. And we got, a few different things with Muppets going on. And it kind of fell off. And now it doesn't necessarily detract from the overall enjoyment of the documentary to begin with. But I kind of wish it had a little bit more of a what's next ending, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, I'm guessing he had such a legacy after his death, as we've talked about now quite a bit here. But yeah, it would have been nice to see them kind of follow that thread a little bit more after his death as to what happened after and how his legacy continues and endures as a result of everything he did.
I'm just guessing Ron Howard didn't want to get into the weeds of the controversies and everything with Kermit's voice. And is it good that it went to Disney? Speaking of which, Stan, I don't know if you would know this or anybody on the panel. Do you remember how much it was sold to Disney for? Because I remember hearing, and when I hear the price now, knowing, things we know, it seems like they robbed it. I think it was like 32 million. Chris, if you're checking that.
Yeah, Chris will check.
I think it was like 32 or 35 million, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You would think it would be hundreds of millions, which makes me think, did Jim know he was passing away at the time it got sold to Disney? Was he sick or something?
I mean, he did have a will already to what's supposed to happen with the Muppets had he passed away.
Was Disney part of it?
And well, I don't think Disney was part of it, but his kids definitely were.
Huh.
So a quick Google lookup, because we all know how we all look today. No, I know, and from Wikipedia, it basically said that it was Disney acquired the Muppets intellectual property from the Henson Company for $75 million.
Okay.
Here's the date. This is the part that actually kind of gave me a little bit of confusion or surprise. February 17th, 2004. Yeah. So that's what it says.
Yeah, it was later after his death.
Yeah, so
even
it was,
70. Yeah. You can make one movie and make back $75 million.
Yeah,
so that's a cheap price for that property.
Yeah, I mean it was because he passed away in 90. So I mean there was quite a bit of time between
14
then,
years. Wow.
I'm just finding that out now, of course, but that's a little bit surprising because actually that would have been, I think, a nice tidbit to kind of go into that last chapter, so to speak, because the way I thought it's like, oh, maybe that is when it was like probably within a year time span the deal was penned and all taken care of with the Henson Company.
Well, wait, Chris, we see him sitting down with
Michael Eisner, yeah.
Michael Eisner talking about selling it to Disney.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
So
deal
it
wasn't
did-
done yet at that point.
Oh, and it took 14 years after that, after his death, to go through.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
that's
that's
something that-
again part of my
1990
surprise.
Yeah, because he had worked out with Eisner that they were going to sell it. They even mentioned there was like kind of a handshake agreement at that point. They hadn't
Yes,
finalized it, and then when he died, as Stan was saying, like his kids kind of stepped in because they inherited a bunch of this, and the deal kind of fell apart. And so it took until 2004 before they ultimately did decide to sell the Muppets back to Disney.
Yeah.
Or sell the Muppets to Disney, where they are now.
Right.
Yeah. Does anybody have anything else that kind of they didn't appreciate very much, or didn't wish that was done differently?
You know, I kind of wish there'd have been a little more detail sometimes about, well, I mean, partly, you know, like partly with his family, but partly like with the other people that he worked with. I mean, we saw quite a bit of they talked about Frank Oz, but they had Dave Goelz there, and there was almost nothing about his relation. He was there as far back as the Muppet Show and is still playing Gonzo to this day.
Yeah.
And I would have loved to see
Me too.
a little bit more about him and his relationship with Jim and some of the others as well, like Fran Brill and even the others like Jerry Jewell and some of those. It just seemed like they kind of got pushed aside quite a bit, whereas I would like to have seen a little bit more of that discussion.
An awesome documentary, if you do want to know more about all the other main puppeteers, is Muppet Guys Talking. You have to,
and I have seen that one, and
Yeah.
so I know there's some great information there that would have fit well within this.
Yeah. Like we were talking, hardly anything on Fraggle Rock.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It was
quick.
Maybe
It was
because
quick. Like, it was like, oh yeah, by the way,
maybe because it's part of Apple now, and yeah, so I don't know.
yeah, and I don't
Well,
know.
they talked quite a bit about Sesame Street, and that's part of
Yeah,
HBO
exactly.
now, so I don't think that's necessarily
It
it.
all depends on who
Yeah.
got permission to do what with what.
Yeah, and I don't know. If
I'm sure Ron Howard has an 8-hour documentary that had to be edited.
yeah,
So-
well, exactly. And I don't know how much Jim Henson actually did with Fraggle Rock, other than trying to sell it. Was one of the things that he was trying to get a station or a network to take him, and he was promoting it actually as that this is the show that is going to put an end to war. Was the way he was selling Fraggle Rock to all these studios. And his thought process was, because what we're going to do is the scenes with the Doc and Sprocket is going to be a different actor and a different Sprocket in every country. So if you watch Fraggle Rock in Germany, it's a different actor playing Sprocket.
Really?
Yeah. And the thought was that everybody would have Fraggle Rock in common. Every country in the world would have Fraggle
Kinda
Rock
like
in
with-
common.
with-
And that was
I will not bomb them. They watch Fraggle Rock.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Disney-
yeah,
Disney
exactly.
did that too.
Instead of, never mind NATO. Are you part of the Fraggle Rock countries?
Yeah, Disney.
Well,
There you
and
go.
also the very premise of the show is showing all these different creatures kind of learning about each other's different cultures and learning to work together and understanding each other. And so it's all built into the heart of the show, this idea of world peace. We can all get
I
along.
would have loved world leaders calling each other Gorgs and Doozers. That would have been.
It's not too late to start.
The Great Garbage.
Yeah. Oh my God. The trash heap has spoken. Yeah.
The special that came out with Jim Henson's celebration of life, because they didn't want to call it a funeral or whatever. It started off actually. It was an amazing Muppet thing. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it or not, but I wish they included this in that. Where
Yeah. Weren't they all looking over the coffin sad?
no, they were kind of talking about they watched a TV show or something about Jim Henson dying, and they're like, or they're having a special for Jim Henson, and they go, well, who's Jim Henson? That's what it was, a special for Jim Henson. They
Yes,
go, who's Jim
I
Henson?
remember that. Yeah, I saw something on YouTube. About
Yeah,
that.
and then I think Robin says, I think he's one of the guys that are below
Yeah.
us.
He's like, what?
And then they all look down and they say, who are these
Yeah, he's-
people? This is freaky.
It's so funny.
Yeah, and I wish they would have included that. And Kermit was not part of that group that was doing this special for Jim Henson.
until the very end.
Right, yeah, and then Kermit
He comes in at the
very
end because someone else had to do the voice.
Yeah. So I thought that was I felt that whole last chapter was too quick.
Yeah, they just
for
had
me.
Big Bird singing Rainbow.
It's not easy being green.
It's not easy being
I'm
green,
mixing the
yeah.
songs up. Yeah, Easy Be Green. And I remember in the documentary with
Yeah.
Carol Spinning, Carol was, of course, Big Bird, and he was trying not to cry while he was singing, and it was just like, yeah, I sat there
That's
going,
gotta be hard,
can't can't even watch. It's so sad.
Yeah. Something that I thought would be really cool for Ron Howard to have done too was even if it was during the closing credits, just kind of put the different Muppets that he played over the years. Like I said, like Jim Henson was that big blue monster, or purple monster at the beginning of the Muppet Show that walks underneath in opening music. Put that guy up there, you know.
Yeah.
Guy Smiley. Jim Henson played Guy Smiley. You know, it would be really cool to have seen that, how many characters he did over the years while he was alive. Would have been something really. I would have included that if I was directing it or producing it, whatever. But it's not up to me. Anything else you guys want to touch on before we?
Caleb, what's one of your favorite character from Jim Henson that he created? Or this is just a question I was just thinking about. Like, what character do you like? I mean, there's a lot that I like. What's one of your favorite characters that Jim Henson created?
Everyone's thinking now. Go ahead.
Well, for me, obviously, I already mentioned
Ernie
from Sesame Street is one of my favorite characters of all time. I loved him so much as a kid just because of his irreverence, his sarcasm, his absurdism. He was a perfect foil for Bert. And I loved seeing in this documentary Frank Oz talking about how he played Bert as like this boring, tight, just very uptight sort of character. Because then it gave Jim as Ernie someone to really bounce off of, in a fun way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't think was Uncle Deadly even around, or did he come after?
He was part of Muppets Tonight. I think that's where he came from.
I think he was in the Muppet Show for one episode. I think the one with Alex.
Yeah, because I thought he was just
character.
Yes.
Yeah. But I don't think Jim Henson played Uncle Deadly. I could be wrong. Like I said, I wish they would have shown us every Muppet that Jim Henson played, just while the credits were going or something. Anyway, what was yours, Caleb?
Man, there's a lot. I think Big Bird, I guess, because I grew up with Big Bird on Sesame Street, and he was like a big kid, and that's what and in the beginning, Big Bird was like this, dopey kid. Hi, I'm, Big Bird, and then he had this, hi, I'm, high pitched voice to make him sound like a kid, and yeah, I just loved him. I guess for Muppets, it's definitely Fozzie, because I love making people laugh, so.
Yeah, very good. Anything else, guys?
Uncle Deadly was performed by Jerry Nelson.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, he's good.
Yeah, that's right. As soon as you started reading it, I remember, wait a minute, it's Jerry Nelson. I knew that. So.
Yeah, they didn't mention much about him either, which it was weird.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap this up. So make sure you check out the Grand Circle Tour podcast, where you can catch myself and Justin. Chris, the independent podcaster, he's looking for a podcast to join. And Panda at bigfatpanda.com. And Caleb Joshua Hill at Fantasyland Adventures. I want to thank all four of you or three of you. Four.
Four of us. Learn to count.
If anything, Sesame Street should have told you 1, 2, 3, 4.
There we go.
4, 5, 6, 7.
This show was brought to you by the number 4.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. These songs are still in my head.
Well, the Ladybug Picnic, too.
Yes.
That was another one that they kind of showed a really short clip on. Ken, take it away.
If you have a brilliant idea for a future edition of The Solo Show and would like to take your turn in the guest host's chair, then drop us an email at thesoloshow01@gmail.com. Tell us your idea for the show, and we'll contact you about a date and a time for you to join us. If you would just like to keep the conversation going or have a comment about a previous show, then visit us on Facebook at The Solo Show. All logos, sounds, and songs that are made by and for Disney and its affiliates are owned solely by the Disney Corporation and are not, nor are they intended to be, the ownership of The Solo Show podcast. We hope you'll join us for the next adventure on The Solo Show. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.